calculate each power of I. So remember that I is by definition the square root of -1, which means that I squared is really just the square root of -1 being squared. So the square root and the squared cancel out. So I squared is -1. So far we have I and then we have -1 in the pattern. If I do I cubed, that's going to be, it's basically I times I squared, right? But remember that I is the square root of -1. And, well, we don't need that necessarily. Just leave this as I. I squared, we just figured out, was -1. So I times -1 is -I. So I cubed ends up being -I. So this is 1, 2, 3 cubed. And then, so I4, remember, is going to be something, the same thing as I squared times I squared. But I squared is -1, and so is another I squared, and -1 times -1 is +1. So I to the 5th would then reset, because it would be I to the 4th times I. So it would just end up being I again, and then we just go through this cycle. So every time we have a power of I, we can figure out which part of the cycle it's in. So if it's divisible by 4, it's just going to be the number 1. If it's divisible, when you divide it by 4, if the remainder is 3, it's going to be -I. If the remainder is 2, it's going to be -1, and if the remainder is 1, it's going to be I. So with I to the 9, if you divide 9 by 4, well, 4 goes into 9 2 whole times, and then there's 1 left over. So the remainder is the only part we care about. The remainder here is 1, which means that I to the 9 is going to be equivalent to I to the 1. And if we look at our pattern, that's just I. I to the 15, so 15, if we divide 15 by 4, we end up with a remainder of 3, because 4 goes into 15 3 whole times, that gives me 12, and then there's 13, 14, 15. So the remainder here would be 3. So you would look here and decide which of these powers of I should go right here.